Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, a new Zion for LGBTQ Israelis. Where would they go that would be more appealing than home? Our digital producer Malika Balau is looking out for your live feedback. This is an intriguing conversation. I have a feeling that the more that we continue the conversation, the more community is going to be piling in with questions.
I will agree that that's probably going to happen, especially because already we're seeing some polarizing comments. We're talking about the LGBT community in Israel. And so we're getting one view. This is Carl who tweets in, I think the government plays lip service to LGBT equality so that they can seem modern, liberal, and tolerant for Western eyes. Well, he got pushed back. This tweet from Aloe says, it's not an image. Gay friendly is a reality in Israel compared to the rest of the Middle East. Now, of course, this is a live conversation and we want to hear your thoughts. So tweet us with hashtag AJStream.
I'm Egi Gitzin. I'm the executive director of Be Free Israel, and I'm in the stream.
Tel Aviv has a reputation for being the gay capital of the Middle East. It's a popular destination for gay tourists and is home to one of the world's largest gay pride festivals. Just last week, the city held its 16th annual Gay Pride Parade and more than 100,000 people came out to support it. Over the years, a lot of legal progress favouring the LGBTQ community has been made. Same-sex intimate relations was legalised back in 1988. An employment discrimination ban was passed in 1992. Gay soldiers can openly serve in the military, and same-sex marriages from other countries are recognised. But while the gains have been great, two Israeli researchers are suggesting there's still homophobia, and it's partly responsible for why some gay Israelis are choosing to emigrate. So to help us talk about this, we're actually joined by the two researchers. Ruth Presser is a feminist and a postdoctoral fellow at the Institute for Cultural Inquiry in Berlin, and Hila Amit is a PhD student at the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. Now, they're not going to be debating themselves. They're also going to be having a conversation with Evan Cohen, and Evan is chairman of Likud Pride. That's a group of gay activists within the ruling coalition party, and Aviv Netta is an Israeli DJ who lives in Berlin. He goes by the name of DJ Aviv without the Tel. I love that handle. It's great to have you all here in the stream. Welcome everybody. Let me start with some perceptions about Israel. This is a page here on my laptop from Haaretz, and it says, Pew survey says Israelis are more open-minded than most of the world. Let's just click onto that Pew survey. So we're looking at the homosexuality part. Here's the key. Orange is unacceptable, green is acceptable, and grey is not a moral issue. So we're looking for the numbers of green and grey areas here as we scoot down and look at these different countries. So we start off here with Ghana. There's a very little acceptance here for a gay lifestyle, and we move down and we'll see other countries like Indonesia. Again, not much acceptance. Let's keep going though, all the way down here as it gets a little better, and find out for Israel. So Israel, 43% of the population are anti a gay lifestyle, whereas most of the population are very comfortable. The green here is I'm okay with that, and the grey area here is actually it's not even a moral issue for me. So Evan, looking at that, in this survey, not that we can use a survey to have an entire conversation, but it does look like Israelis are comfortable with the community that's there that reflects sort of the LGBTQ community. What is your real life experience? You can have surveys, you can have a legal framework, but what is life like for you as an out gay
first
man?
of all, I don't feel comfortable with the numbers, I have to admit. The fact that there are 43% who feel uncomfortable or dislike LGBT community is still a problem, and until that 43% disappear, it's going to be a problem. But the Israeli society is a very complex society, and over approximately 40% of our society are religious or religious Jews or Muslims, and this is probably the explanation for most of the 43%. Personally, I have never encountered any issues myself. I mean, I served as a captain in the Israeli military. I work in a conservative party, in a right-wing party, and I haven't personally come in contact with any homophobia personally. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that the circles in which I operate, it's non-existent.
What about your friends and and the friends in your community? Are they also equally used to no prejudice, no discrimination, no bigotry as well?
Well, look, I live in Greater Tel Aviv.
Right.
Living in Greater Tel Aviv or Greater London or Greater Berlin is not the same as living in, so to speak, the outback.
Sure.
So, of course, life is going to be a lot easier. I can say that there is one area where we do find a lot more homophobia, or I'd be more specific, transphobia, because I think that homophobia is a lot less of a problem nowadays. Transphobia is more in the forefront of what I find negative reaction of the public to the LGBT community. So we're okay, we as in gay men, and lesbians are also relatively okay. I think that transphobia is where we have to focus most of our work today.
Well, Hila, I want to bring you in here because our community is weighing in on what life on the ground is like for the LGBT community. So we got this tweet from Elizabeth. She says, non-religious Israelis are mostly not homophobic, echoing really what Evan said. Central Israel is gay-friendly, and there are laws protecting our community here. But on the other hand, Gary tweets, LGBT rights in Israel aren't as good nor as progressive as we're led to believe. So you spoke to people for your research. What are some of the stories they were telling you?
I think the most important thing to know is that there's this perception that we talked about, that there's a lot of legislation that is promoting LGBT rights, but there is a public atmosphere of homophobia and I talk about how politicians would express themselves in public and not be condemned for their actions, how people would open Facebook groups saying that people who go to the Pride March are pervert. There's just a Facebook group that was opened against the Pride March in 2 days in Ashdod, which is the 5th largest city in Israel. So there's a lot of people in my research that said that they faced homophobia, they faced discrimination, they faced intolerance from the families. And I think it's not just, as it was said before, it's not just gay men and lesbians that are okay. I personally was harassed twice in Tel Aviv. I was witnessing a lot of events that happened to other people in public atmosphere. And I think Israel would really like to portray Tel Aviv as a gay heaven, and it's not. It's definitely not. And people are leaving also because they can feel more free to walk in other cities that are more accepting.
Ruth, what did you want to add? I can see you leaning forward into the conversation. Tell us about your experiences.
Yeah. Well, of course, in my experience, I heard the same stories about the impossibility of living actually in Tel Aviv, and most of the people I encountered came from Tel Aviv or Greater Tel Aviv. There are two things I think we should mind. First of all, we can't talk about gays, because there are all kind of peripheries that relate to class, that relate to ethnicity. And so, I can't speak in terms of gays, not even lesbians. It depends which kind of. And I agree that trans people are more bound to encounter homophobia. And another thing, even these days, we still need, we don't have a straight group in the Likud or any other party. Yeah, we have a gay group. So I think that we're not there yet, not as much as it is promoted by the Israeli state.
So I think it's really important to mention that this whole idea of portraying it in Israel as this very open and very liberal, we feel, a lot of activists feel that this whole idea is basically an ideologic cover to what is going on in the Palestinian territories and the discrimination inside Israel. And it's really comfortable for citizens in Israel and for the government to portray Israel as this very open and liberal space. And I'm not saying that there isn't openness, but there's still this gap between what's going on on the ground and what's going on the top, on the cover.
Okay, I'd like to comment on something that Hila brought up. I find it's a bit important. Look, I'm a scientist. I deal with statistics, I deal with numbers. And when we look at the immigration from Israel, we're at the bottom of the OECD. We have less immigration than almost all of the member states of the OECD. So if people are immigrating from Israel, they're certainly doing more so from the other OECD nations. On the other hand, if we look at the immigration from Israel particularly, it has been on a decline, a steady decline, from about 27,000 people in 2002 to less than half that today. So, anything talking about a change in the trend of the immigration here, the only change in the trend is that there's less immigration from Israel than ever before, and these are numbers, these are statistics. So while people might do some sort of qualitative sociological research, interviewing a few of their friends, this is not a statistic. These are not numbers. These do not reflect what's going on in Israel. This is just fact. So you have to present numbers. These are the numbers.
I think what's important to say here, if I could comment on that, I think what's important to say is that this whole notion of being so obsessed with the numbers of people living in Israel, emigrating from Israel, this is all about this Zionist conception that we must have a Jewish majority in Israel.
But you are saying there's a growing trend of immigration.
You're
saying there's a growing trend of immigration, and this is counterfactual.
First of all,
it's simply not true.
First of all, if you go and look, I've looked at the numbers as well.
If I'm in my head, like there is no doubt that there is a big wave of immigration of Israelis that coming to Berlin.
There is a doubt. The numbers speak otherwise. The numbers are otherwise.
One moment. What I'm saying is that you cannot compare Tel Aviv to Berlin. Berlin is the center of gay life and young people life right now in the world. And when you put Berlin front to Tel Aviv, yeah, Berlin is the place to be to gay, to lesbian, to bi and transsexual people. I think that there is
Tel Aviv was voted number one gay LGBT tourist destination in 2012, not Berlin.
Yeah, so 30,000
and I disagree about how this...
Guess I'm just going to ask you all to take a breath for a moment, because I'm just going to get everybody caught up and to speak, because this is a conversation that is happening in Israel. And just so everybody understands, one of the things that Hella and Ruth were saying in their studies is that they're looking at a growing part of the LGBTQ community leaving Israel, partly because they were experiencing homophobia, and the place they were deciding to go was Berlin. So now that we have all of that information, we're all on the same page. What is the community saying, Malika?
Well, Evan, I actually want to direct these next series of tweets to you. This is picking up on what Hila said a little bit earlier. She mentioned gay rights being used as a cover. So we see pictures like this. This is on Facebook, and this is of the Pride Parade last week, June 13th.
Looks like my Facebook.
This is picked up. There are lots of other pictures like this, showing people out in the streets celebrating LGBT pride. Then we get this tweet, though. This is picking up on that cover. Berkeley says, I would define pinkwashing, and pinkwashing is a term we saw lots of people tweet us about, as using gay rights as a cover for horrible brutalities. This applies to gay rights in Israel. So, Evan, do these two things, is there a dichotomy there? Can you kind of pick that apart?
Actually, I think that the situation today, the pinkwashing is a great idea, because the situation today is that the gay rights in Israel are relatively good, and the statement is that Israel is projecting outwards the wonderful gay rights that we have here, so to speak. There's a lot of room for improvement in order to cover up other things. But we should do the same, for example, with women's rights in Israel, or perhaps with freedom of speech rights in Israel, freedom of press rights in Israel. Generally speaking, the freedoms in Israel are a lot more. I don't even want to compare ourselves to our neighbors. I mean, even if we compare ourselves to countries like Spain or Italy or Greece and Southern Europe. And recently we had a delegation from Finland here who spoke about gay rights in Finland. We're better off than some of the European countries too. A lot better off than some of the European countries. So yes, there is room for improvement. But to say that we would rather Israel didn't have gay rights or didn't have women's rights or didn't have any of the other things like freedom of speech, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's really totally ridiculous. In 1993, long before people started bringing up this whole idea of pinkwashing, the Foreign Ministry of Israel gave me a diplomatic passport to travel abroad with my spouse. That's 21 years ago, long before pinkwashing was on the table. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the reality. The reality is there are gay rights. So what do you want to do about that?
The reality in which the government of Israel is supporting the arrival of about 30,000 gay people to come to Tel Aviv for the Pride March without even knowing what's going on a few kilometers behind the separation wall. And I think this whole notion of pinkwashing is important just because if Israel wasn't using it, the government wasn't using that as this notion that shows Israel, that shows Israel as this liberal place, I might not have a problem with it. I do agree with you that there's a lot of improvement and the situation is not bad in some aspects for gay lesbians who perform a very heteronormative performance. People who go to the army, people who get married, people who have children, okay? Other people do not have the same privilege of walking in public spaces or going to the beach without being harassed. And this is just what's happening inside of Israel.
Okay, Hila, take a breath for a moment so we can have a conversation. Evan, what did you want to say, just briefly, and then I want to go back to it. Aviv.
No, Hilar did mention the separation wall, which we have now, which has prevented suicide attacks since the beginning of 2009. But the question is, okay, behind this wall, within the Palestinian territories, perhaps Hilar would like to tell us what's going on with the LGBT community. I mean, I won't offer any information. Maybe Hilar would like to tell us how the LGBT community is treated and why thousands of LGBTs from the Palestinian Authority are trying to get into Israel. If it's such a terrible place to be, why are they coming here? Why are these refugees escaping the Palestinian territories into Israel? That is something Hilar should address before she starts talking about gay rights in Israel. I mean, it's ridiculous to think anything else.
All right, so Guest, let me just get us back on. Guest, let me just get you back on track, because it's broadening out to a conversation that we do not have time to have. So let's just focus on the reason why we all got together today. Aviv, you're sitting there in Berlin. Why are you in Berlin and not in Israel?
Well, first I have to say that I really love Israel. That's my home. My family is there, and I love my cultural background, and that's why I'm doing my Jewish-Israeli parties in Berlin. But right now, you can see that Berlin is a center of culture. It attracts a lot of young people, a lot of gay and lesbian and people from all over the world. And yeah, that's where I choose to live my life. So.
Okay, so that's an attractive reason to be in any city, right? Okay, so let's go back to community, see what they have to say about what they've been hearing so far.
Well, there are other views on why people are leaving. Ruth, we got this from Elizabeth, who says some are leaving because they're tired of the political atmosphere in Israel, growing militarism and racism. The LGBTs who left were part of a leftist wave of immigration of a few hundred Israelis, and that's it. She says life for LGBTs isn't bad here, so she's slightly poking holes at some of the research. What do you have to say back to that?
Well, actually, I have to say that although some of the people I engage with in my ethnography do leave because of the hostility and the political and militaristic polity that we live in Israel, I have to say that it's a little bit more complicated. So even those that are Zionists and that identify themselves as Zionists are leaving Israel. So it seems that the notion of Israel as the safe haven for Jews doesn't really work, I mean, in real life. I mean, it's much more complicated, and stories that starts with exile and persecution don't necessarily end with Zionism. And it's important to understand the fact that not everybody, at least in my research, hold leftist standpoints and still don't find Israel necessarily as the only solution or the place to feel safe.
This is a very...
Can I add to that something?
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
from my research, one of the themes that came up is that just as people who are not conforming to the LGBT kind of mainstream, people who are transgender, for example, felt exactly the same not belonging to the Israeli collective as left-wing people. And I think there is this connection between these two kind of oppressions, or these two kind of feelings of not being part of what is happening, that just pushes people away.
All right, did I hear Evan sigh? Was that a big sigh there?
Yes, you did.
All right, what's behind the sigh? Unpack your sigh for us.
It's really, really important, and I want to reiterate this point. I know I've said it, but I have to say this again because it's really important. Just before I say it, I'll proceed by saying that I'm really pleased that I live in a free country in which people can get up and leave if they want to, and they can return whenever they want to. First of all, that's a great idea. I mean, the concept of getting up and leaving is fine. I have no problem with that. Insofar as all of the OECD nations are concerned, we are at the bottom of OECD. We have less emigration than any other country. In fact, the immigration here, and I'm going to reiterate this, has dropped over the last decade and a half. It is lower today than ever before. So telling people that there's this wave of immigration is counterfactual, or in plain English, it's a lie. It's simply not true. And so you might want to use this counterfactual evidence in order to paint some sort of ideological picture or do some sort of research, but the numbers speak differently. The numbers are different.
Can I respond to that?
So I would like to respond. Okay, please go ahead.
Sorry.
Can I respond?
You're talking, Ruth. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So regarding the numbers, I have to say that Germany is considered now the fastest growing Jewish community in the past decade, and that's the effect of migration of Israelis. So I'm not sure
in Germany.
how you define. Just a second.
No, I missed it. You said Germany. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure how we define migration because at least in my research, people come and go. So sometimes they continue to pay social security and perform citizenship, financially and in other ways. So I don't know how we articulate migration.
So Ruth, take a breath for a moment. I just want to check with you. Ruth, give me a moment here.
Sure.
Is there a wave of emigration from the LGBTQ community in Israel, specifically to Berlin? This is what Evan's pushback was. Is that what you're saying?
No one really knows. And one of the problems to count immigration of Israelis is the fact that in the last decade, over 60,000 people claimed their European Central and Eastern European passport or citizenship.
All right, so Ruth, is that a yes from you? Let me just check because we're running out of time, so you have to be to the point.
We don't know how many.
You don't know.
We're talking about discourses and
Okay. May I make one remark about the Jewish immigration to Germany?
Go ahead, just briefly, go ahead.
50,000 Jews emigrated to Germany from the former Soviet Union. The Israelis are not the bulk of the Jewish population in Germany. Another counterfactual bit of evidence that we're hearing here. So, I mean, please don't say that the Israelis are flooding to Germany. There are only 15,000 Israelis in Berlin today, and that's the upper end of the estimates. 15,000 Israelis in Berlin. That's nothing.
That is not true. That is not true. Also, because we don't know how many. We don't know how many, but the circulating information also used by authorities, by Israeli authorities, is that there is a trend of Israelis, and also the fact.
All right, so Ruth, give me a moment here. Aviv, you're sitting there quietly in Berlin right now. What are the attractions of Berlin?
Sure. I have to say that I'm not a scientist and I never made any research.
Right.
It just sounds to me that it's easier to immigrate between Spain to Germany and France to Germany or inside Europe. So,
all right, let's be very direct here. As a gay out man in Berlin, how do you feel compared to if you were a gay out man in Tel Aviv?
Well, I just think that it's not a fair comparison because Germany is way more developed than Israel in all the considered to gay rights. But I think that Israel going in the right direction. I think that actually, for the gay point of view, that the fact that the foreign ministry using gay rights and to show how good is it in Tel Aviv, it means that it's really getting better. I will not go to details if I agree with that it should be like that or not, but
I'm going to ask you a very direct question here, DJ Aviv, without the tell. Would you ever go and live in Tel Aviv? What would have to be different for you to go back home?
Well, right now the reality in Israel is very, very complicated. Unfortunately, I don't see myself able to go back to live there. Because of gay rights and because of a lot of other reasons. And this is the truth.
All right. Thank you very much. To be continued in a moment. Malika.
Well, in asking what it will take for some people to go back, Gary has one answer. He says the Israeli government should make an official statement publicly affirming that all LGBT people are equal in all ways in Israel. We can talk about in the post show whether that's feasible or not.
I can actually hear the guests in the background. So we've got Hila and Ruth and Evan and Aviv. They are not done yet. Thank goodness we have a post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Hold fire, everybody. We're taking you online in just a moment. Now, before we go, let me tell you about the next AJ stream. Former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard will be joining us to talk about improving education opportunities for children around the world. If you would like to talk to her, so easy. Tweet #AJstream and your questions will be stacking up ready for Julia Gillard in tomorrow's show. Until then, thanks for watching. See you online. Hello again, this is the Stream's online post show. We've been talking about the LGBTQ life in Israel and some new research that suggests that ongoing problems are driving Israelis to seek new homes overseas. So I want to get back to Ruth and Hila, because you particularly were so kind enough to say, we're going to come and share our ideas with you, and we've been chatting about some of them. But Ruth, why did you decide to do this as a study anyway? What was your motivation?
Well, actually, it started with my PhD and my research regarding belonging, queer belonging in Israel, and what happens when you don't adhere to heteronormative or normative notions of how to be gay.
And what does that actually? Unpack that a little bit, because obviously these are terms that you use every day in your academic life. But for other people who don't use this terminology, what does that actually mean?
It means assimilation to domestication and consumerism. It's being or trying to transform into a very specific kind of middle classness with very specific kind of kinship structures that assimilate into marriage or marriage-like relationship, and gender performance that it's normative, that doesn't contest normative notions of how I should look and behave in public and about my being part of publicness. And what I found out is that if you do not adhere to these specific terms, then you do not belong, and belonging is really, precarious and vulnerable. And then I was thinking, let's see what happens when we go outside the nation. And since Berlin, at least in the discourse that we witnessed in the past decade, I mean, there isn't 1 week that goes by without some piece in the media about this trend. Yes?
Okay, all right. So Ruth, I'm not going to get you to do an entire lecture. Just wanted to get the idea of where it came from. And then Hila, why Berlin? Why did the focus head into Berlin? Because this is what Evan has been pushing back about a lot. That it was particular. Everybody's going to Berlin. There's this wave of emigration. How did you find that Berlin was the place that people were going to?
First of all, I want to say that I think a lot of people are going to Berlin, but a lot of people are going to other main capital cities for queer life.
Right.
Like my research is dealing with London and New York as well.
Sure.
But there's a lot of people moving to Paris, San Francisco. Berlin, I think it's closer to Israel, it's easiest, and it's definitely the most easy place to live economically.
Sure.
So you can get the queer life in other places, but Berlin has that effect. And there's also a lot of people in Israel, as Ruthie mentioned, with East European passports, and it's just easier to go to Germany.
Sure. Malika.
Well, Evan, I want to bring you back in here with something Ruth said. She mentioned belonging, and so online people are saying that that feeling and that sense of belonging is coming from some groups and not others. So this tweet from Gary, he says, the main activism for LGBT rights comes from the Israeli left, the LGBT community and allies. It doesn't come from Likud. Now, of course, you're the chairman of the Likud Pride organization. So how do you, what do you say to that perception that Likud's not doing enough?
Okay, well, we don't have an hour here, so I'll keep this short and sweet. We formed our group about 3 years ago, the LGBT group within the Likud party, and up until then the discussion of LGBT rights was not on the agenda of the Likud. It wasn't that the Likud was opposed to LGBT rights, it simply wasn't an issue, it was a non-issue. Nowadays we can see that this government is forwarding LGBT legislation more so than any other government, and in fact more so than any other government, including 3 left-wing governments which we've had over the past 2 decades. And this is a government headed by the Likud. The Prime Minister passed a law to government recently. It was under his demand that this law passed.
Well, that's not
the religious
fair thing
party.
to say. It was different times.
Yeah, going back to left-wing governments in the 90s,
no, I just want to say that it's not fair to the very...
Hila, hold up a minute, because Aviv was speaking. Aviv, continue that thought so I can actually hear it. Go ahead.
What I wanted to say, that it's not fair to compare it to the left-wing government, because it was different times and it was not completely left-wing government. The Religions Party was part of it, so the left never really won the election that it could have his own coalition. So to say that it's better than the left-wing government, it's just false. It's not right. There was not really left-wing government like since years.
And also, if I can answer that, also.
Go ahead, Hila.
I'm just saying that this notion of this government is passing more legislation, that's not happening on the ground. On the ground, this government is also pushing legislation onto the floor and then pushing it back. So nothing is really changing. You have headlines saying we're passing this rule, and then 2 days after it falls on the committee. So I think it's all also about the coverage and how we would like to portray it.
Aviv, what were you saying?
That I just want to say that I would expect now that in the coalition there is like two big liberal parties, that the situation in 2014 would be better than what it's in reality. So to compare it to the time that the government was built with the parties that coming from the religion side, come on, it's not fair, it's not right. Like you are part of the Likud right now. You are in control. You have a non-religion government. Like you don't have any religion party in the government.
It's not true. It's not true. Aviv, you were the head of the Meretz group, the gay Meretz group. And Meretz, in fact, sat in one of the first left-wing governments here since 1977 under Yitzhak Rabin. And the leader of Meretz, and I'm sorry to bore all the viewers and listeners with this, but the leader of Meretz actually said that she would, in fact, become ultra-Orthodox, or wear a streimel, as she pronounced it, in order to achieve peace. And she gave up the gay agenda of her party, which she had pushed up until 1988. She gave up all of the liberal points of her party.
I have to say, I will sacrifice.
So, gentlemen, now we're into a political back and forth. So, guests, just give me a moment, everybody. Just give me a moment, because we actually have very little time left, and I don't want you to be arguing this back and forth, because you have Twitter handles and you can tweet each other very nicely. So here we have. Have a look here. Have a look on my laptop here. Was that polite? I was just being mean to you all. The Guardian: lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender rights around the world. Let me just click across here, because what I did was I looked up Israel and I looked up Germany, and we've got consensual sex for both countries, legal. Workplace non-discrimination, legal protection for both countries. Marriage recognition in law, short of marriage, we have the same, although I know in Israel you have to exit the country and then come back in order for that marriage to be recognized. Adoption legal in Israel, adoption some rights in Germany, and then protection against hate crime. It's a little gray area for both countries. If you put them side by side, there seems to be very little difference. So let me just ask you just very quickly, Ruth and Hila and Evan and also Aviv, if you had to push gay rights a little bit further in Israel, what would it be? Give me one sentence. What would be your focus? Ruth?
Well, I mean, I can't talk gay rights without other rights. So I would like to push Israel into becoming more democratic generally. Yes, to divide or to stop having a Jewish country. Yeah, so, I mean, you know, but if I may just add one sentence about this.
One sentence, Ruth, because I have to wrap up and we're literally, they're going to pull the plug out.
Good. So one thing, Germany or Berlin is not necessarily, is not always better also for gays. It's just another option.
Another option. All right. So Ruth Presser, thank you. For Hila, one thing. If you're going to push the LGBTQ agenda in Israel, what would you want? What's the next thing on the list?
I'm following Ruti, and I say there's no LGBT rights without human rights, and the moment that Israel would become a democratic state and not a Jewish state, and human rights would be recognized, LGBT rights would be recognized.
Aviv, you said you're never going to go home, or not yet anyway. What would make it more appealing for you to be back in Israel?
More appealing. I have to say that it's not considered to gay rights. I agree that I would like it to see Israel is free and to see peace in the Middle East. Yeah.
Oh wow! Nothing much then. Peace in the Middle East. Wow.
To be honest, I think that the conflict that we have with the Palestinians,
it's a much bigger conversation.
Is in the center of a lot of other things, and that I think that's the main reason why people leave.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. And we've had that conversation online with our audience saying, hey, it's not even that big a deal. There are bigger things happening in Israel, in this part of the Middle East, than whether people live in Israel or head across to Germany or London or anywhere else. Evan, you're there, you're an activist, you're fighting the fight. What else do you need on your list to check off?
Actually, what I would like to do is to erase things from the list. I think the government should be a liberal government, meaning it should not interfere with the personal lives of the citizens of Israel.
Okay.
Marriage should not be something that the government deals with. Adoption should not be something the government deals with. Surrogacy has nothing to do with the government.
Right.
If the government withdraws from our personal lives, there'll be a lot more equality across the board. We don't need the government in our lives.
Wow, they would have nothing to do, Evan, but I like that suggestion.
That would be wonderful.
Thank you to Evan, to Aviv, to Ruth, to Hila. We have so much more to talk about, but that is all the time we have today. Really appreciate your time. So moving on, our next conversation will be with the former Australian Prime Minister, Julia Gillard. She'll be joining us in the studio to talk about improving education opportunities for children around the world. You have a question? Tweet us, #AJStream. I will see you online. Thanks for watching.